Hey, welcome to an episode of SOFREP Radio. I am your host, Rad, and I am super stoked to talk about my next guest. But first, I just want to do something a little different. Usually, I shout out the credits after my show, but today, I just want to give my producer, Anton, just the front and center thank you, bro. I appreciate all you do to help make this go up everywhere, and I just go and tell people, look up SOFREP Radio wherever podcasts are. And that's because of you, bro. So Anton, I want to give you a shout out. So when you listen to this, bro, from me, Brandon, and everybody here, thank you. And I also want to say thanks to Brandon Webb for always letting me have the mic. All right. It's been years and years of working with you, and I really appreciate it. And I trust that the guests enjoy having me here as well. So without further ado, I have the one and only Don Mann, author, Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL, triathlete, I believe, athlete. Is there a father figure in there somewhere?
Probably.
Probably. He is a father.
Yeah.
All of the titles, right? And I just want to remind you, your everyday neighbor is a father, is a coach, is a possible Navy SEAL, is just a dude next door to you who has a job like you, who is an extreme athlete, who likes to put themselves through Olympic style training, who like to drown proof themselves. Tell me about that, Don. Tell me about drown proofing yourself and all the things that you've had to become this person today.
Well, Rad, thanks for having me on your show. And it's good to meet you. And thanks for all you do.
Yeah.
You know, I was very fortunate because when I was a young guy, teenager, I only had one goal, and that was to become a professional motocross racer. And that lifestyle, it was wild. We were reckless. We did everything wrong, but I trained hard to be a motorcycle racer, which meant I did that instead of anything else I should have been doing. I didn't do sports, organized sports. I didn't study. I didn't go to school. I did everything else wrong. But I had this sense of patriotism in me, like your father. My father instilled it into us when we were young guys, and my family, brother and two sisters, he instilled this into us because when we were attacked, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, he and his brothers, his two brothers and his sister all joined the military. And my grandparents had 4 stars on their front door. And every time there was a serviceman killed or people killed in war or something happened with the military, he'd say a prayer. And so I grew up with this great influence from my father. So I knew I had energy. I knew I wanted to do something exciting, maybe not as exciting as motorcycle racing, but hopefully as exciting as that. And I knew I wanted to serve our country. So when I found out about the Navy SEALs, it was everything and more that I could have dreamt for. And if I hadn't found it, my life wouldn't be much at all, I'm sure. And I loved finding out what the SEALs were like. I like finding out how hardcore these guys were and the training they did. And when I saw the video of them parachuting and diving and shooting and running on the beach and just doing all these calisthenics and drown proofing, like you're saying,
Yeah.
I was thinking there's nothing else in the world I want to do than this. And I was right, because I've never found anything I would have rather have done. And I've stayed in the SEAL community since 1981 till present. And it's, for me, I was very, very fortunate to have found it.
So you were still wearing like OD greens in 81, 82?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah.
That's legit stuff right there, right? I can just see it. Whoo-wee. Oh, do you have jungle boots?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Jungle boots.
Yeah. Huh. Oh, that's a good look. That's a fashion, with I tell you, so in war games, I do these war games out here in Utah. There's a lot of different loadouts that everybody kind of gravitate to. And you have these reenactors, and they're just like, if they can get something from the, early days of the Frogman through, all the way to today's modern stylings, you should feel flattered. It's like a Kobe Bryant jersey. You just need the royalties.
Well, boy, I might still have some at home. If I do, I could send you some.
Oh, hey, I would frame it and probably use it, actually. I would use it. I'd wear it. Yeah. Some old Alice gear or something.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
I still have some of my initial issue just for nostalgic purposes, you know?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, that's hot.
The wet belt in the canteen and, you know.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff. And it was just basically everything that all the other enlisted personnel were getting. You were just getting it through like the SEALs.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You know, and then so when you were in, so that's post Vietnam, in the 80s. You know, what was kicking off in the 80s for the SEALs?
So when I first came in, it was late 70s, but I was a corpsman, and the SEALs didn't care to have brand new corpsmen in, so you had to spend some time either on a ship or with the Marine Corps. So I chose the Marine Corps for the physical fitness aspect of it, and I really, really enjoyed being with the Marines, and I was an athlete, and so the Marines, they were happy to have me there. All they did, they sent me all over the world to race in triathlons and marathons,
Wow,
bike races, and all types of running races. So I was like a paid athlete with the Marines until I got my orders to go to BUD/S in 1982, which was probably one of the happiest days of my life. I finally got my orders to BUD/S, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL School. And in the 4 years it took to finally get those orders, I did a lot of visualization, you know, and I know that helped me out a great deal. I visualized how hard it would be to do all those calisthenics on the grinder and those long cold ocean swims and Hell Week without sleeping for a week. I visualized it, and I did a really good job at visualizing it because every day in BUD/S, I never thought I'd quit. I never felt like quitting. But every day in BUD/S, I'd get home after a hard day thinking, wow, what a hard day. But it wasn't as hard as I visualized. I thought it would be much harder. I thought Hell Week was going to be much harder. I thought, you know, these 4-mile ocean swims were going to be much harder. They were easier than how I had visualized it. So I became a true believer in visualization. And BUD/S wasn't easy at all, but every day it was easier than I thought it would be. So it ended up being an enjoyable experience for me. I enjoyed every bit of it.
No, I love it. I love the visualization. You know, I also like, if I'm going into meetings, I will have multiple like conversations with myself about what conversations could happen and transpire inside of said meetings before I go in with these people. And then I go in there and it's like, okay, what are you going A, B, or C on me? You know? Exactly. Yeah. And they go B, and I'm like, oh, I've already visualized me talking to you about B. You know, so here we go. And it's like, I've already had that, like when I go to an audition for a movie, and you just prepare just to have that visualization so you can go into the audition without your paperwork. You got to just have that. I love it.
It's your second time there. It's not your first.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, my wife and I, we snowboard. And yesterday she's like, let's go into the snowboard park, the terrain park, where there's features and like little rails and boxes. And let's hit that one little rail because it's little. And let me tell you something, Don, it's not little. Okay. But it looks little from the chairlift. But when you get up to it, you're like, this thing could hit me in my head. You know, I could hurt myself. So what did we do? She's got the camera on, and I'm thinking, okay, all right, it's filming me. I've got to do this. You know, she's almost called me out. I got to visualize it as I'm going down the hill. I'm visualizing myself hitting this pipe and sliding it off and landing it. And what did I do? I came up to it. I hit the pipe first time ever, slid it off, and landed it. And I was like, okay, visualization.
Yeah.
Sir. Yeah. A believer. I'm a believer in it. I love that. Yeah,
and you live in the best place in the world for snowboarding.
That's right. It's here in Utah. Actually, after this podcast, I'm going up to go ride.
Good for you. Good for you. I love Utah. Yeah, I love it.
It's beautiful. We have about 500 inches still up there of a base on our mountains. Boy. So yeah, the season will end in about 2 weeks for us here. 3 weeks, maybe, in the middle of May. That's when, and the snowboard ends in June, the 1st of June.
And that's when the great mountain bike riding starts.
That's exactly right. And they have that here. You can bring your bike, get on the tram, go up the hard part. Actually, I don't know. Down's pretty brutal too. If you're not ready for that, it's going to top over, dude.
Yeah.
It's legit. Now with visualization, that you're very empowering with your words. You wrote like motivational books, and I think he even wrote like the United States Navy SEAL Survival Handbook of how to survive as a Navy SEAL, elite warriors. There seems to be somebody who's always on a lot of the books with you that I noticed, and his name's Ralph Pizzullo. And I just want to kind of pull that out, like how does Ralph and you come together? You have the main Don on there, right? And then you got Ralph on a lot of different books.
Yep. So I'm working on book number 23 right now. We've published 22 books, and I did about a third of them alone, and I did the other third with my buddy Ralph Pizzullo, and then the other third I did with two other co-authors. Mm-hmm. I like doing writing much, much better with a very good co-author, because I don't really enjoy being behind a computer and typing up a lot. I like the thoughts, I like the process. I just don't like typing it all up, So Ralph, when I met Ralph, what a colorful guy he is. I mean, I called him up. Actually, I called up this person, and his name was Thomas Sawyer, like Tom Sawyer. Yeah. And he was the writer, and he was one of the producers for the TV show Murder, She Wrote. He's a very talented guy. And I had this idea about putting together a book sort of like Forrest Gump, because Forrest Gump, my mother had just passed away, and I was thinking about my mother, and I was thinking we had one movie that we both loved, and that was Forrest Gump. And I loved the soundtrack to it, and I loved the athleticism part of it, and she loved all types of parts in it. But I was thinking of Forrest Gump, then I started thinking all that was, it was a history lesson. Forrest Gump walked us through Johnson and Vietnam and Nixon and the Chinese ping pong era, and his girlfriend Jenny dying of the virus, which was the AIDS.
Segregation at the school. He was just like right there with the little girl trying to go to school.
That's right, right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And John Lennon.
John Lennon, yeah. I love that, yeah.
He's all like leaning in, like
on
trying
the
to live.
Show.
Yeah. I love that show. I love it. Elvis, I mean, come on,
And then I was thinking, so, I spent time in the CIA. I was a SEAL, and I've been around the world for about 50 years. With some really interesting experiences. I could probably do what they did with Forrest Gump, but instead of having a character that's fictional, maybe have a fictional SEAL or CIA guy, but instead of him going back in history, have him going forward. What could happen in Colombia or Venezuela or Russia or North Korea. So when I talked to Thomas Sawyer and I told him this idea, he said, Don, I love that idea. I said, I'm a writer, but I'm not talented enough to put together something like this. I would need a really good co-author. And that's the first co-author I ever had. And he introduced me to Ralph Pizzullo. And I talked to Ralph, who was working for Oliver Stone out in Hollywood. And he was kind of getting fed up with Oliver at the time. And he had some funny stories, but I told him my idea about this book. He said, and I live in Virginia. He said, Don, I love that idea. Let me come out and talk to you. So he came out that weekend. It was a Thursday. We had the phone call. He flew out on Friday, and we spent the weekend at my house in Virginia. And we talked about the book, and we put it together. And the publisher said, yeah, we like it. Can you do let's do a series, do part 2. So that ended up going to eight-part series. And then I learned more and more about Ralph, and that he dated Madonna, and he hung out with all these actors and actresses, and he went to a party with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and Jack Nicholson, and him and Mick Jagger just sitting on the couch talking about books. And he had all these great stories, and Ralph and I became very, very close friends. And that book we wrote, we also got a publisher calling us, hey, Don, I want you to write a book about you being the advanced training officer at SEAL Team 6, which is what I was when I retired. I said, no, you're not going to like that book because I can't say anything really that you're going to be of any interest in. I have my top secret clearance yet. I'm not going to talk about anything I'm not supposed to. They said, we're offering you 6 digits. I said, doesn't matter. I don't have the option. I can't turn my back. When you leave that command, you shut the gate, and the gate is closed, and you leave the secrets back there.
And it goes with you. Yeah.
And the publisher was saying, Don, a lot of people are starting to talk, and they're making a lot of money. You're not. you were the training officer when bin Laden was, well, when I left the team, they killed bin Laden. Rob O'Neill killed bin Laden. And I was a training officer of that team. And she said, your book's worth a lot. I said, I can't do it. Finally, after saying this to 2 publishers, the 3rd publisher said, all we want is your bio. Don't say anything you think's classified, and send it to the publication review board to make sure it's cleared. I said, my sports bio is going to be boring. A lot of people have done what I've done. And my military bio is going to be boring because now the guys are at war, and I wasn't at war when I left the teams, when I retired.
Right.
But they liked the story, and that was the book that went to first best time, New York Times bestseller I've had. So it worked out.
Is that with the Hunt series? That's what it is? Hunt the Wolf and Hunt the Scorpion or Hunt the Falcon?
Yep.
Is
well,
that
was a fictional one that was based off of Forrest Gump. And the other one that the publisher wanted me to give my bio was called Inside SEAL Team 6.
Oh, yeah, I have that right here. Inside Yes, totally cool too, by the way. Yeah, and a lot of people may think SEAL Team 6 is like six people. It's like
they would be wrong.
Yeah, it's more like 600 people.
Well, you know what happened when I first came in? There was SEAL Team 1, SEAL Team 2. There were 2 underwater demolition teams on the East Coast and 2 on the West Coast. And then Marcinko created this undercover, long-haired, we had beards, long hair, earrings. You could never tell SEAL Team 6 guys were in the military, but that's how they were supposed to look, And even us guys at SEAL Teams 1 and 2, we always wondered what they were. Nobody talked about SEAL Team 6 then, but we knew they were around, but they were so secretive, you never heard anything. And I remember once looking out my windows, guys were saying, hey, those guys are SEAL Team 6. And we couldn't even believe we're seeing guys from SEAL Team 6. And so SEAL Team 1 had the West Coast obligation and responsibility. So if anything happened on the west side of the world, the West Coast side of the world, SEAL Team 1 reacted. And SEAL Team 2 covered the east side of the world. Well, SEAL Team 6 had worldwide responsibility, and they had to pack up the bags, get on a plane, wheels up in that plane within 4 hours of any terrorist act. So they were much, much busier than anybody was at the time. And the reason it was called 6, I guess, to get back to your question, there was a SEAL Team 1, a SEAL Team 2, and then Marcinko named it SEAL Team 6 just to confuse the Russians. Thinking, oh boy, there's probably a 3, 4, and a 5 somewhere that there wasn't, Now there is, but back when he created it in 1980, there wasn't anything but a SEAL Team 1, a SEAL Team 2, and a SEAL Team 6, along with the underwater demolition teams.
That's awesome story, by the way, right? The SEAL Team 6 being created just to throw off the thought process, right? Just using that simply to say.
And it was a maritime counter-terrorist organization. So the big Navy, big Army didn't want that. They said, we already have a Delta Force. Charlie Beckworth created Delta Force. Delta Force is Army's hardcore, tier 1 organization.
Yeah.
And Marcinko and the people who started 6 were saying, well, we don't have one. We have all the SEALs, which are all really top-notch, but we need a tier 1 unit, which is pretty much unlimited funding. And they're like the break glass in case of war. Anything the president needs, you have SEAL Team 6 at Delta Force right there. And that's what it was.
In 6 with DevGru, it's the same, right? They're the development group there. So really it's like they trial and error equipment for other teams and whatnot. Could you talk a little bit about DevGru SEAL Team 6?
Sure. A few years ago, I would have had to say, no, I don't have any comment on it. And I even feel funny talking about it now.
With respect, yeah. Whatever you want,
No, but thanks. But really, Dev Group, or Naval Special Warfare Development Group, it worked for calling the team Dev Group instead of 6. Because you do see these guys who look like civilians, and they're shooting weapons, they're parachuting, they have all this dive gear, they have all these optics. So testing gear made sense to say that's what these guys do, development, a dev group, the development group, these guys test gear. Because a lot of places you don't want to go in and say you're SEAL Team 6. So it worked out really well for that. And and that it was kind of a cover that got blown early on, but now both terms are used kind of together.
Yeah, I've just heard it loosely out there. I was just wondering.
Yep, yep. It's actually, if you hear people say SEAL Team 6, they're older guys like me, when it first started, because the term's kind of they're trying to keep it dev group.
I see.
Now.
I see.
I like
And so
SEAL Team 6 better, of course, but
you did mention that you were transitioning out, because I mean, you're an 80s child, you were into the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 9/11 happens, right? And you're full on Navy SEAL. You're full on at what rank in 2001?
okay. So,
Yeah, tell
actually,
me, where were you?
I came in 77, which I always felt guilty because I came in after Vietnam. I was positive I'd be in Vietnam. I wanted to go. Now, looking back, knowing it was a mistake,
Yeah, I get you.
but we
Yeah.
lost 58,000 people. I just felt I should be there fighting for my country. Regardless, history shows it was a mistake, which I hate that we lost all those people now. I look at it differently. But, and then, we came up to 98. I was getting bored in the SEAL teams because we weren't at war. And we were chasing down bin Laden, trying to find him, but it was all dry holes. We never found him. And so I retired after 21 years and then went right to work for the CIA. And then I was going all the hot spots, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, all these places. Nothing nice. And then we got hit on 9/11. And then we were going after bin Laden too, the agency. And then, so I almost saw more action in the agency than in the teams. But it was a nice combination having 20 plus years of both.
Yeah, a trusted dude in the position. That's you.
Yeah, it was, there's nothing I would have rather have done. It was just really, I don't want to say pleasant or enjoyable, but I just liked the culture. I liked when I got out of the teams, and the guys in the agency with me were all ex-team guys or special forces or Delta
Maybe
Force.
Fulfilling is the word,
Yeah, it was just you felt like you were doing something good,
Yeah.
Fulfilling.
100%. And you were the one, because like someone had to be that guy. Someone had to take on the burden of your job details and all that stuff that you have to know about. It was you, it wasn't me, it was you. And so thank you. Oh. Take a deep breath.
Thanks. I worry now because, I just knew I had to support our country. I just have it in my heart. I mean, the country's in trouble. You got to be there for it. It bothers me now a great deal that people don't see that anymore as much as they did when I was growing up. People, it's the recruitment. The recruitment numbers say that out loud. We can't get people in the military now. And the ones we can get in, a lot of them aren't physically fit. A lot of them are overweight or not in shape. And we're failing badly on all the numbers trying to get into the military now. There was a brief, the Marines were doing better than anybody at one point. And then when the latest Top Gun movie came out, Maverick, I think it was called, that boosted up the sales, the recruitment numbers in the Navy. But the Army's really low and recruitment's really low. And the big military says it's because of COVID. I don't believe that. I think it started with Benghazi on how, we had President Trump saying, you touch one hair on any American's head, all hell is coming down on you. Mm-hmm. And our terrorist groups were scared to death of Trump. And he had a plan, a slow withdrawal. We're going to keep the airstrip there, Bagram Airfield. We had air support if we needed it. And then Biden made this promise, I'm going to end the war, and he did. But he just pulled everybody out. He gave everybody our weapons, which are being used against us now.
With that said, I just remember the other day, General Milley was in front of Congress or whatnot, and he was being, asked about the equipment, right? And he said that the person on the ground in charge over there made sure that all American equipment was either destroyed but what they got was the equipment that was given to the Afghan army. So that was not, it may have been American made, but it was already Afghan army equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the equipment that they're mostly referencing, I think, because Milley just came out the other day and talked about that in a deposition. And then also to give a little bit of a benefit to Biden, the President Biden, is Donald Trump did sign the agreement like December 22nd of pulling out of Afghanistan, and even invited the Taliban to like Camp David and to like the White House, right? Like, holy cow, like, I don't know what that was thought process, right? But to kind of just put it in perspective, I get it. I 100%, I had friends who were like going over there to try to get friends out of there,
right.
And things like that. I think that was more of the blender that was happening, is like, what about our allies that were like, translators and people that helped us, that were promised that they'd be taken care of? Where are those promises being kept for them? Right. And
yeah.
I think I just want to put it in perspective, because it takes two to party at this situation. And I know that Trump was going out from the election, and he signed that in December to say we're out, if you recall.
Yep. And he had a timeline, and the timeline was working. We didn't lose one person. We didn't lose a person.
Right.
And then, now the interpreters, translators who helped us that we left back there, we're getting reports. They're going door to door, finding these guys and ladies and cutting out their tongues. I mean, you don't hear that on our news, but they don't. We have short memory span here in the U.S., but they don't. They don't. Those people helped the enemy. They helped the infidel, and they were left behind. They don't have protection anymore. They're going door to door, slicing out their tongues.
And they just came out saying that they're going to stone women, and the Taliban came back out and said, this is going to happen. You're going to understand that, and this, that, and the other. You better obey all the laws that they want in place over there. It's so cowboy, it's so Wild West over there. There's no real. You got one faction that doesn't even recognize the word Afghanistan, and they live there. You got another faction that recognizes the word Afghanistan because it's a word that they understand. And you've got all these different, tribes and people who they just want to herd their animals and like live their life in this rough land.
That's true, because that's how I see it in all those countries, everywhere. Hamas, Israel, Russia, Yemen, Somalia, Ukraine. Kids are kids. They're just innocent. The mothers really just want to take care of them. Right. However, the enemy, and I've heard this from the guy who personally cut off Daniel Pearl's head. And he's also the guy who worked with bin Laden and bombed us on 9/11. Okay.
And he's the New York Times reporter that you're talking about, or the Washington Post reporter, right? Daniel Pearl. That's right. Pearl. Who was captured. Yep. Yes.
So Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, we call him KSM. He was captured, and he admitted to, destroying the buildings and hitting us on 9/11. KSM, we had him in captivity, and the doctor who was interviewing him, and this, I'm not giving away a secret right now because this is all open source now. And the doctor's a very good friend of mine, and he was interviewing him, and he was saying, so why women and children, they're innocent. How could you hit us on 9/11, kill 3,000 people? I mean, don't you feel, a lot of those people were Muslims. Don't you feel bad about killing the Muslims? And KSM smiled. He said, no. If we can kill many infidel and some Muslims get killed along the way, that's okay with us. That's okay with Allah. That's okay with us. And then the doctor, I won't say his name, but he's a very best human being you could imagine, a patriot. They call him the torture doctor on the left, but he stopped, we think the agency feels he stopped 200 lives from being lost from interviews and interrogations he's done with KSM alone. So KSM smiled, and then he said, the doctor said, well, what about the women you're killing? I mean, these are young girls and women. KSM smiled. He goes, no, they support the infidel. We kill them early. They don't support the infidel. So, well, what about all these little kids, boys and girls running around? So they grow up, they either support the infidel or they're the infidel who's our enemy. We kill them too. And he smiled. And then the subject turned about assassinations and beheading people. And then KSM said it was like when I killed Daniel Pearl. And everyone, and this is before we knew who killed him. Everyone looked at him like, you killed Daniel Pearl? He said, oh, yeah. So the doctor runs over to the computer, writes back to D.C., to headquarters, said, KSM just admitted to killing Daniel Pearl. They said, well, ask him how he did it, because we have some photos of just his arm and everything. Have him do that movement. And KSM did the movement as if though he had the knife. And they sent the pictures back. And then the doctor said, was it hard to kill him? And KSM smiled. He said, no. I cut through the arteries. It was messy. When I cut through his voice box, the screaming started. It was only hard getting through his spine. And he said, you can't even tell if he was joking or if he was a play on words. Was it hard to do it? So that's the enemy. And that's the enemy who's going around going door to door, cutting the tongues out of people. But that's also the enemy that promised Trump, we won't touch a hair on anybody's head because we know all hell will come down on us because of what you just told us. They were scared to death. With Biden, they know there's, it's words mean nothing. And when that day happened, I believe that's what happened with our recruiting efforts. When people saw that the military just being left there and being killed, 13 of them, I think it was that day, they were killed. And then leaving all the people who supported us. We've never done that to anybody before. We've always had leave no man behind. And that just for a political promise, that deal, that promise was broken to anybody who's worked with the American troops or were American troops. We just got on the planes and left out of there. And the billions of dollars we left, no, those have been found in swap meets all over the Middle East selling to the enemy. And,
no kidding.
And
I would imagine there was a 20-some-year war in Afghanistan where, it was back and forth. So I bet a lot of equipment does show up on, that black market.
I'm talking about the new equipment we just purchased for them. And when they added it all up, everything, the air support, everything that we gave them, it would have been the 6th largest military in the world they could have formed with it that we gave to them.
Well, you mean like that the Northern Alliance and that the Afghan army already was given already, right? That's what you're talking about. Or are you talking about
we just left a lot of it brand new stuff?
Well, Bagram Air Base was Russian, right? It wasn't even an American base. It was a Russian base, right?
We had control of Bagram. I've been there many times.
Right. No, and I'm not doubting that, but I'm saying that in Monopoly world, it was Russian. And then Americans took it over to mobilize. So it's not like we invested in that tarmac, kinda, but not really, because it was already a building it was already some structure. There was like Russian building still, right?
Yeah, it was old, but it was we had an air base in the Middle East that we were paying big money for. They allowed us. They were happy. They didn't mind that we were there. We had our air support, so we could have overhead support for any of our troops on the ground. And those people were pulled out before the troops on the ground were pulled out. And that was a big military mistake. And
there was just a lot. It was just a mistake to even agree to pull out, in the beginning, I mean, if former President Trump wants to, sign agreements because he has to give the playbook to the new guy, and he wouldn't even do that. So he's still drafting plays in the playbook that were supposed to go to the new guy, but the new guy couldn't even get the playbook. So it's like he's just signing away stuff and just leaving it in this mess, which he even is recorded saying, I want to leave as much as I can for Biden to deal with.
Yeah, he did say that. But it wasn't like a playbook. DOD, Department of Defense, had the playbook. And, I know Biden turned everything around that Trump put up. He turned it all around, the border, everything. He stopped and reversed course. But for DOD, for the military, when he tried to reverse course there, you have 4 stars and 3 stars fighting it, but they are still correct to what you just said. They are the commander in charge, Biden, can say, stop, go a different direction. But the DOD put together the playbook. They had it all.
Right. And
They
there was
did.
a general I interviewed once, and he was transitioning George Bush to Barack Obama. And he was in the middle of the two different, one Republican side, one Democrat, but he was the general that was transitioning. And he said, it was really like they wrote everything out. Like, these are the most 30 important topics that the president needs to have in his lap. Right. And he was the guy that was giving that to Barack Obama. And I said, how did you manage that transition from Bush? He's like, well, we already knew that Bush wasn't going to be president. So we had to get this document, this playbook kind of thing put together. And then I had to get that to the new administration. So they knew these are what is super important, sir. And I said, how did you maintain the sir aspect of transitioning? He said, Rad, when we sit down as the military at the Pentagon, it says U.S. Marines, U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force. So we understand what we're in it for. We're not in it for that, politician style rhetoric, whatever. So he was like, because he transitioned from one to the other and stayed in a position and continued on and was very successful, 3-star general.
Yeah.
And, that's what I thought would have been also. That's kind of what should have happened, right? It should have been this transition. Like, these are really important. You should focus on this. Congratulations on the job. But it was very much back and forth. We've lived through what's still ongoing with that former administration.
It is. It's, and I don't want to just pick on one president over the other, but right. I can say, we've been together as a country for over 250 years, right? I mean, I would say the first 200 years, we were doing pretty well. But Republican and Democrat go back and forth, doesn't matter. The president I look up to the most since I've been alive is Ronald Reagan. Sure. And, but regardless of that, Republican, Democrat, Reagan, Carter, Clinton, Obama, Bush, whoever you pick, since Vietnam, I'm very, very disappointed in these big policy blunders we've been making. Because we talked about Vietnam early on. We lost over 58,000 people in 10 years. We walk out and we lose the war. Like, oh, I guess we made a mistake there. But then, we've done it since then numerous times. We did it in Afghanistan. We did it in Iraq. Now we've been putting all this money in Ukraine, and another bill was just passed. And now we're going to keep that war going. They are just getting slaughtered. But America,
who's getting slaughtered, do you think? Ukrainians?
They've lost the war. They've lost months ago, and there's no way they can win it. The Russians have all this equipment and ammo and artillery that they're producing 24 hours around the clock. They have a 5-to-1 ratio of people waiting to go to war. They're having people going, men 40s and 50s year old, paying for their own cardiac care or their own prosthetic care, so they can go back and fight the war. Their level of patriotism is sky high, and the sanctions.
Let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. Since they just got their relief aid passed through, right? It just went through, but for like the last 6 months, when it was supposed to really matter, it was being blocked. In these politicians were blocking it for whatever reasons. They were just damming up the process of getting this money to aid Ukraine. But yet here it is. They gave the money to aid Ukraine. So why didn't they just give it in the first place? Because they waited 6 months and got nothing out of it. Nothing.
It was all politicized. But the $61 billion that's going to Ukraine, the estimates are 1/3 to 2/3 won't make it there. It'll make it to Lockheed, General, Raytheon, the big companies here. So a lot of it will go to produce weapons here and go right back into our, money cycle here. And then when it gets to Ukraine, which is the most corrupt country in Europe, everybody knows that it really doesn't make it out to the troops at all. And then speaking of the troops, that battlefront there, if you call it a battle line anymore, it is so broken up. And they can't get men to fight anymore. So they just passed a law so they can go throughout Europe trying to find the Ukrainians who left the country. And they're dragging them back to Ukraine and said, you've got to fight for our country. They're putting battalions of women up front now because they don't have the men. And Russia is just long lines of people wanting to go.
I don't doubt that there's women fighting, and I don't doubt that. And I just talked to a gentleman who was in the trenches, um, and he was taking story and article documentation for like Esquire magazine, and he's a former Marine recon, and he's probably in his 30s, 40s now, but he was talking to the 20-year-old saying, "Hey, how'd you get your discipline? How did you learn how to hold your weapon?" Because he says like the 50-year-old guy learned old Russian tactics.
Mm-hmm.
He's the older guy that's fighting in this Ukrainian Russian war. But he wanted to know about these younger kids that are in there, with this capability. And he watched this kid. He said he was just slinging his rifle correctly. He just had his hand the way he was holding it. And he's like, "How'd you learn that?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know." He's like, "No, there's got to be more to it. How?" He's like, "Video games?" He's like, "I played a little video games." He's like, "No." He's like, "Do you play war games with airsoft guns?" He's like, "Yes." So before the war, before 2012 and like 2016, all these time frames, they weren't really at war. So they were playing airsoft all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these young kids had all this games on the weekend that they were playing. And so here he is now taking whatever training that helped instill in him, and he's in the trenches. And he's getting a story written about him, and that's in the story, and so I know they're fighting. They don't seem like they think they're losing. Maybe that's just a morale boost, maybe what the Ukrainian fighter is feeling is like, from what I've talked to, is a sense of pride about what they're standing up for. And maybe they're not getting the full scoop from the trenches, maybe they're just like, this is what we're here for. I'm here because my buddy's fighting and his buddy's fighting, and we're fighting together in these trenches, right? Because, they just think they're doing the right thing for their country. The other guy thinks he's doing the right thing for his country. These ground level infantrymen who are just being ordered to go to battle are just feeling like this is what I'm supposed to do. It's these high top puppet masters up here, right? Metallica writes songs about, it's the puppet masters that are the problem. Like, that's what it is.
Well, for anyone who goes and looks at the numbers, the Ukrainians, the numbers are up over 600,000 who have been killed or wounded right now. What we're talking Vietnam, 58,000. They've lost 10 times that, over 10 times that. The Russians can, again, 5-to-1 ratio as far as fighters they have. Plus, they're developing their own ammo, artillery, and they have a long line of people who want to fight. Ukrainians can't get people to fight anymore. So many of them are wounded. It's hard to find men in Ukraine anymore. Now, Kiev is doing fine. Zelensky was so happy he got his money. But the experts, when you hear, except for General Jack Keane, but when you hear other leaders in the world historians, other generals, leaders from around the world, they all say the same thing. Ukraine lost a long time ago. And that $61 billion, whatever gets to the fighters after it goes to this corrupt country, and they hand out some to some of the military and some to Zelensky and some to Raytheon, the money gets divided up. They don't know what that money's going to do at all. They don't have anything they can put it toward that's going to help, other than more and more Ukrainians are going to be slaughtered and killed.
Let me ask you, who's more corrupt in this situation, Russia or Ukraine?
They say Russia is the second most corrupt country in Europe.
After Ukraine?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is really? I've not heard that. I mean, I've maybe heard it in I don't know, maybe I never paid attention to, it, but I've talked to so many folks. They don't put it in perspective. This is the first time I've heard this.
Yeah. And Ukraine's always been known to be the most corrupt country there. But the thing is,
I thought it was the breadbasket of the world is what.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That it is. And in Russia too, but Ukraine probably more so. But the thing with Ukraine is when they were attacked by Russia, all of us were in support of Ukraine. I mean, how can Russia do this? Up until alternative news got bigger and bigger, the networks that aren't protected and guardrailed against being able to say other sources of news coming in. And that's why the rest of the world is questioning what we've been hearing all these years. So, 2014, of course, that's when the war really started there. Okay, here's an example. If somebody said to President Biden, hey, President Biden, we're just going to put 50,000 folks on your Mexican border. You don't mind, do you? Russian troops. There's no way we would allow that. We didn't allow that happen during the Cuban Missile Crisis, 63. You can't have the enemy troops on your border. So when the Soviet Union broke apart in 1991, U.S. State Department shook hands with which was once the Soviet Union. Now all those countries dismantled. Now all that's left is Russia. And they said, I'll tell you what, you let us put Germany back together. Let's tear down that wall. We'll reunite Germany and all those 14, 15 countries that make up the Soviet Union that are no longer Soviet Union. We won't try to get them into NATO. We won't come 1 inch closer to your border. Well, we've lied. We've taken 14 of those countries, made 14 of them NATO. So Putin, who's run the country for 25 years now, he's just saying, you can't keep doing that. You can't keep doing it. But no matter what, you're not taking Ukraine. That's got that 1,000-mile border, whatever it is. You're not coming on my border. And we went on the fast track trying to get Ukraine into NATO.
I thought
and we have weapons all
proliferation. The nuclear proliferation agreement, though, was the Ukraine dissolves its nuclear arms, which it had, and it would be recognized as its sovereign country by Russia. Like, that was it.
Yeah, they did turn in their nuclear weapons.
Right.
I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing in the long run, but...
Well, they wanted to just be a sovereign nation. I mean, look at Zelensky. He was an actor, like Reagan. You like Reagan. And Zelensky was also an actor. Yeah. And he was just thrusted into a green sweater, combat wearing kind of looking dude.
We the U.S. we needed a guy who would be, yes, we'll do whatever you want. We needed a yes man in there. Zelensky, he's very, very popular guy.
I'm not saying that we're not involved in putting other interim governments in. My father was a Green Beret, and they are mobile politicians. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not against those ideas. I just am saying this is what you've probably heard what I'm saying.
Oh, sure. And when Zelensky came in, to tell you the truth, when Russia invaded Ukraine,
yeah.
Okay.
Shot down the airliner, right? They shot down the civilian airliner.
That too. Yeah. Exactly. They did some horrific things. But when Zelensky came in and he was attacked by Putin, the world was all for Zelensky. The world was all for him. Like, we got to run to his aid. And I say the world, I mean mainly U.S. and NATO. Okay, European Unions, nations. So yeah, we all backing him 100%. And then, the corruption and all the issue that starts emerging a little bit. We all knew way before that it was the most corrupt country in Europe. Some people say the world. I heard it compared to Mexico. I didn't know Mexico was that corrupt, but I heard it recently that it's as corrupt or more corrupt than Mexico. But anyways, regardless, countries are corrupt and they can say we're corrupt too, right?
Yeah, right. I mean,
but anyways, when Zelensky came in, he came in to try to end corruption. That was part of his campaign. I will end the corruption here. And when he didn't, people started going against him a bit. But right now, Putin, the world is backing Putin right now on this because he's not attacking civilian populations, kind of like Israel's doing in Hamas. He's not doing that. He's saying, hey, I told you guys for years, you can't bring NATO forces into Ukraine. You can't be on my doorstep. Keep Ukraine neutral. That's all.
Who's he to say that? He's not the emperor. He doesn't run the empire. He's just a little man with a complex. Who's he to say? Who is he to say that? Don't come into the Ukraine when it's not even his.
Well, if you turn it and look at Canada or the Mexican border, and China was going to go on both borders, we would do our best to stop that too. And if Russia was going to go on either border, even though we don't say you can't, we would not let it.
But it's not like, okay, so true. Okay, U.S. would not like that. Okay. However, that has to be like Mexico doing that, right? Because it'd have to be like Mexico coming to take Utah back.
Well, if Mexico sided with Russia or Mexico sided with China,
which we took from Mexico. And so Mexico's president could say he's the emperor and he wants his empire back in that regard.
and if we allowed that, we could be without a country.
And then I would be an insurgent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I would be called.
But that's how the whole world has been working since day one.
I tell you,
That's the way
holy
the world
cows.
works.
Fire truck, bro. I just want to snowboard and hang out and surf and just like, know that I am ready to box.
Rad, I am definitely not like what you might think. I mean, my heart breaks for the American Native Indians still, what we did to them. I mean, it really, really does. I mean, when I see what we did to them, it breaks my heart. It was so wrong in every aspect of the world.
Yes.
And, but, and it's to me, our biggest error we've ever made as people, as Americans. What became Americans is what we did to Native American Indians. But then again, every country, every border of every country is man-made. And this is how it's all done. It's not to say it's right.
Right. Otherwise, Russia would go right back to Mongolia.
Yeah, well, Russia right now, all they're saying, we've ripped up the peace deal that Putin's been trying to have us sign. He wants peace with U.S. And we keep saying, nope, we're going to let these Ukrainians die. We're going to put them on the front lines because Americans don't really care if Ukrainians die. Nobody really cares. You don't see anybody saying, oh, these poor Ukrainians dying. You don't, and 600,000 of them have died because we keep pouring this money into Ukraine so Ukraine will weaken our enemy is the reason.
Well, and someone who's a SEAL advanced trainer and understands what these young men, who coming through, these 20-year-old, 30-year-old guys are going off to do more than anyone is what right? And so, we have the number one military, the number one, special operations community in the world, hands down. And these young men, you've looked them in the eyes. They've crossed your path on their way out to other destinations that, they're just going to be asked to go and take care of. And for you to have been so involved in that Rubik's Cube of naval special warfare for so many years, it's just such a great honor to have a back and forth conversation with you where we can show others that you don't have to know each other to have a candid, casual, respectful conversation with one another. We can still break bread. We can still have conversations. We don't have to be at each other's throats. You don't have to wave a flag. You have to wave one flag, and that's just the American flag. Okay. And you don't have to tell anybody who you want to vote for. You can just go vote. And you should. And I just encourage that. And I also encourage people just go to the recruiter and talk to one and see if they can step into a career in the military because, the SEALs, like the Green Berets, are 1 for every 100 will make it. So if they don't, you still need to be there to support them because they're badass and they need that. So I think you're a badass. And I just want to say that to you, Don, like just like that, dude.
I appreciate that, Rod. Thank you. And I really appreciate all you do as well. But, I like what RFK Jr. said. And he was being asked the same issue you just brought up. Like, it's great when people can talk. It's great. Like, people with differing opinions can talk. And because this culture we have now is, don't bring up politics. Don't talk about something. Go in your safe zone if it's going to bother you or something.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of a strange thing. And RFK Jr. was asked that, and I loved his answer. And he said, well, listen, I've got 115 people in my family, and a lot of my relatives are strongly oppose my views, my political views. And some of them oppose it so much, they go on the network on TV channels and they badmouth me. But my uncle and my father, RFK and John F. Kennedy, they always told us, when you can't talk and you stop talking, that's worse. Learn to talk to one another. Just learn to talk to one another. At Thanksgiving, we have different views on different sides of the table, but we can all talk about it. And I just
That's right.
I just wish we're a long ways from that in this country, as we know. Huh?
Well, hopefully we could bring it full circle. Hopefully it's our conversation right now that is the missing puzzle piece to everything, just to be copacetic and kumbaya. But if it's not, I'm okay with being uptrained, whether it's taking boxing classes or learning how to be a better marksman with my rifle or whatever the case is. Better to be uptrained so I don't have to use it, to be humble about it.
Yeah, yeah, and not to sound like some radical crazed nut thinking the world's going to end, because I'm not that, but I do strongly feel, we did drop the bomb twice, and we ended the war in Japan, and maybe it saved a lot of lives. That's the thinking right now. But right now, we have 9 countries with nuclear weapons, 10,000 nuclear weapons now in this world, all pointing toward one another. We have a bunch in those NATO that used to be the part of the European Union, and now we have them there, and we also have them in the former war pact countries. And we have them facing Russia. They have them facing us. And everybody's on edge. Everybody's on edge. And so to your point, I think this is the time to talk more, because in the big picture, this is the most dangerous day in the history of the world. And tomorrow is going to be more dangerous. And the people who are at those levels and who have they're in position to talk to their counters in other countries, and even in our own country, different sides of the aisle, it's the time to do it more now than ever before. Because Israel, Iran, one fatal mistake there, it is a fatal mistake.
It already is. The fuse is lit.
It is. It's lit all over the world. North Korea can't wait to jump in. Iran's trying to stay out of the war because they have too much to lose. Russia doesn't want that war either. Russia, China, and Iran have too much to lose if that goes to a regional war, because there's money to be made with the oil, and everybody needs the oil, regardless of Iran,
and they have they have one of the biggest oil reserves in the world in Iran.
Yep, sticking to us, which we don't touch.
Bro, I don't even know. I don't even want that conversation.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I just got to drive to work. That's all I know. I am an American. That's all I got to say. Okay, and I'm happy to be here
and you're
driving
an American
on the freeway,
who's enjoying life and snowboarding and living in a great country. And you could tell just by your words how much you love it and respect it, and that 100%. You're a good American because you appreciate everything we have here.
Every single thing, including you. And all of those that you've helped, like I said, Rubik's Cube over your career to go off and do these things, the Brandon Webbs and the Luttrells and the Kyles that everybody's learned about, and all of the fame, and, these guys going off and giving their all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to say so much thank you for being back on SOFREP Radio. You're always welcome as a guest to be on SOFREP Radio. Your books, Inside SEAL Team 6, Overcoming Obstacles, Facing Your Fears, Hunt the Wolf, Hunt the Scorpion, Hunt the Falcon, United States Navy SEAL Survival Handbook for those that want to learn how to survive like an elite warrior. To your co-author, Ralph, you're a triathlete, combat motivated veteran that's airborne, scuba qualled, and the whole 9 yards. And you've been a great guest on the show today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rad. And thanks so much for having me. I look forward to the next time.
Well, with that said, on behalf of Brandon Webb and the whole crew that rows the boat here at SOFREP Mafia, I want to say thank you. Go check out our merch store. That's full of all sorts of branded goods and items that we love that you purchase and tag us in on the internet. And also our book club. Go check out the book club. We'll try to get Don's books in there. And again, on behalf of Don, Mann, and myself, Rad, I say peace.